Welcome to Vox Story, the podcast where you learn real English through real stories. No grammar rules, no boring lessons, just incredible stories and the vocabulary that comes with them. If this is your first time here, welcome. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, let's get into today's story. Imagine this. It is 11:40 at night, April 14th, 1912. The North Atlantic Ocean. The air is freezing. The sea is completely calm and completely dark. There is no moon. Visibility is almost zero. On the deck of the largest ship ever built, a lookout named Frederick Fleet is scanning the horizon. He has no binoculars. Nobody gave him any. And then he sees it. Something enormous. Dark. Straight ahead. He grabs the phone and calls the bridge. 3 words. Iceberg right ahead. It is already too late. What happens in the next 2 hours and 40 minutes will become one of the most famous disasters in human history. Over 1,500 people will die in water that is minus 2 degrees Celsius. A ship that everyone believed was unsinkable will disappear into the ocean forever. This is the story of the Titanic, the night everything went wrong. And by the end of this episode, you will understand exactly what happened. And you will have learned some of the most powerful English words you will ever need. Let's go. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand what the Titanic was and what it meant to the world. In 1912, the Titanic was not just a ship, it was a symbol of human achievement, of wealth, of progress. People called it the greatest engineering feat of its time. An engineering feat is a remarkable achievement in building or construction. Something so impressive that it seems almost impossible. Building the Titanic was considered the greatest engineering feat of the early 20th century. The ship was enormous, nearly 270 meters long, over 52,000 tons. It had a swimming pool, a gymnasium, a Turkish bath, and restaurants that looked like the finest hotels in London. It was by every measure extraordinary, and it was said to be unsinkable. Unsinkable. Impossible to sink, no matter what. The ship's designers had built a system of watertight compartments that could be sealed off if the hull was damaged. They believed that even in the worst-case scenario, the ship would stay afloat long enough for everyone to be rescued. The Titanic was widely believed to be completely unsinkable. That belief, that absolute confidence, would prove to be the most dangerous thing on board. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic left Southampton, England, on its maiden voyage. A maiden voyage is the very first journey a ship ever makes. It is always a special occasion, a celebration of everything the ship represents. April 10th, 1912 marked the Titanic's maiden voyage from Southampton to New York. On board were over 2,200 passengers and crew. Some of the wealthiest people in the world were traveling in first class. Businessmen, celebrities, millionaires. They had paid enormous amounts of money for the experience of sailing on the most famous ship ever built. But there were also hundreds of people in third class. Immigrants from Ireland, Scandinavia, and across Europe, traveling to America with nothing but hope and a single bag. For them, this was not a luxury trip. This was a one-way journey toward a new life, toward a dream. In English, when someone leaves their home country to live permanently in another country, we say they emigrate. And the people who do this are called emigrants. Hundreds of immigrants on board the Titanic were hoping to start a new life in America. 2 very different worlds. One ship, one destiny. For the first 4 days, everything was perfect. The Titanic moved smoothly across the Atlantic. The food was extraordinary. The music played every evening. Passengers danced and laughed and felt like the luckiest people on earth. But on the bridge and the control room of the ship, there was growing concern. Throughout April 14th, the Titanic received 7 separate warnings about ice in the water ahead. 7 warnings from 7 different ships. All of them said the same thing. There are icebergs in your path. Slow down. But the captain, a highly respected man named Edward Smith, did not slow down. The Titanic was traveling at roughly 22 knots, which is about 40 kilometers per hour. Fast for a ship that size. Why didn't he slow down? Because that was standard practice at the time. Ships did not slow down for ice warnings unless the ice was actually visible. It was considered unnecessary, excessive, overcautious. In English, when someone is too careful, more careful than the situation actually requires, we say they are overcautious. But sometimes being overcautious is exactly the right thing to be. In hindsight, the decision not to slow down was a critical mistake. And hindsight is another important word. Hindsight means understanding a situation clearly only after it has already happened. Looking back and seeing what you should have done. In hindsight, the warnings should have been taken far more seriously. 11:40 p.m., April 14th, 1912. Frederick Fleet, the lookout in the crow's nest, sees the iceberg. He rings the bell 3 times, the signal for danger ahead, and picks up the phone. Iceberg. Right ahead. On the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch reacts immediately. He orders the ship to turn hard to the left and the engines to reverse. Full stop. But the Titanic is enormous. It cannot stop or turn quickly. It takes time, precious, irreplaceable seconds, for a ship that size to respond. It is not enough. At 11:40 p.m., the Titanic strikes the iceberg. Not head-on, it scrapes along the starboard side, the right side of the ship. The collision lasts just 10 seconds. To the passengers, it feels like a slight shudder, a vibration. Some people barely notice it. But below the waterline, the damage is catastrophic. The impact has buckled the steel hull and opened 6 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments to the sea. Water is pouring in. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, goes below to inspect the damage. He does the calculations quickly. The Titanic can stay afloat if 4 compartments flood, but 6 are open. The math is brutal and simple. The ship will sink in approximately 2 hours, he tells the captain. The captain stares at him. Are you certain? Andrews nods. The word certain means completely sure with no doubt at all, and Thomas Andrews was certain. He had built this ship himself. He knew every bolt, every plate, every calculation. Andrews was absolutely certain the ship would sink within 2 hours. What happens next reveals something deeply human about people under pressure. The captain gives the order. Launch the lifeboats, women and children first. But here's the problem. The Titanic had 2,208 people on board, and the lifeboats could only hold 1,178. Even if every single lifeboat was completely full, more than 1,000 people would be left behind. And it gets worse. Because the crew was not prepared, there had been no lifeboat drill. A drill is a practice exercise, a rehearsal for an emergency. The crew did not know how to load the boats quickly or efficiently, and many passengers refused to get in. No lifeboat drill had been conducted before the ship set sail. Why did passengers refuse? Because they were standing on a ship that everyone believed was unsinkable. The Titanic felt solid and stable beneath their feet. The lifeboats, small open wooden boats, swinging in the dark over the freezing ocean, looked terrifying. Many passengers chose to stay on the ship. That decision cost them their lives. The first lifeboat launched with room for 65 people. It carried just 27. Lifeboat after lifeboat left the ship half empty or less, while over 1,000 people remained on board. Meanwhile, the band kept playing. This is perhaps the most famous detail of the entire disaster. As the ship slowly tilted and the water rose, the musicians gathered on the deck and played. They played waltzes, they played hymns, they played to keep people calm. Not one of them survived. In English, when someone stays calm and continues doing their job in the face of certain danger, we say they showed remarkable composure. Composure means the ability to stay in control of your emotions under extreme pressure. The musicians showed extraordinary composure in the final hours of the Titanic. At 2:17 a.m. on April 15th, the last lifeboat left the ship. Over 1,500 people were still on board. The Titanic was now tilting sharply at the bow, the front of the ship, pulling upward at the stern, the back. Passengers were sliding across the decks. Furniture was crashing. People were holding onto railings, onto ropes, onto each other. At 2:18, the lights flickered and went out. At 2:20, the Titanic broke in two. The bow plunged into the ocean first. The stern rose almost vertically into the air, a giant black shape against the stars, and then followed. In 2 hours and 40 minutes, the largest ship in the world had disappeared beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. She now rests 3,800 meters below sea level, about 600 kilometers off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. The word plunge means to fall or drop suddenly and with great force, usually into water or deep place. The bow of the Titanic plunged into the ocean at 2:20 in the morning. In the water, over 1,000 people were fighting to survive in temperatures of -2 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the human body can only survive for 15 to 30 minutes before hypothermia sets in. Hypothermia is when the body loses heat faster than it can produce it, causing the body temperature to drop to dangerous levels. Many of the passengers died from hypothermia in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. The lifeboats were nearby. Most of them had empty seats, but almost none of them went back. The people in the boats were afraid that if they returned, the desperate survivors in the water would swamp them, would grab the sides and tip the boat over, killing everyone inside. So they waited and listened and did nothing. Only one lifeboat went back. Lifeboat 14, commanded by 5th Officer Harold Lowe. He pulled 6 people alive from the water. 6. At 4:10 in the morning, the RMS Carpathia arrived. It had received the Titanic's distress call and steamed through the night at full speed, dodging ice floes in the dark. A distress call is an emergency signal sent by a ship or aircraft in danger, asking for immediate help. The Titanic sent its distress call using a brand new emergency code, one that had only recently been introduced internationally. SOS. The Titanic was one of the first ships in history to send an SOS distress call. The Carpathia pulled 706 survivors from the lifeboats. That was all that was left. Out of 2,208 people, 706 survived. More than 1,500 were gone. The world was stunned, devastated, and then furious. How could this happen? How could the greatest ship ever built sink on its very first voyage? How could there not be enough lifeboats? Why did the crew not go back? Investigations were launched on both sides of the Atlantic, and what they found changed maritime law forever. Maritime means relating to the sea and ships. The disaster led to sweeping changes in maritime safety regulations worldwide. New rules were put in place. Every ship must carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. Every ship must conduct lifeboat drills before departure. Every ship must have a wireless operator on duty 24 hours a day because the nearest ship to the Titanic that night, a vessel called the Californian, had turned off its wireless for the night and never received the distress call. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, known as SOLAS, was created in 1914 directly as a result of the Titanic disaster. It still governs maritime safety across the entire world today. SOLAS, created after the Titanic, remains the foundation of maritime safety law to this day. Now let's review every word and phrase from today's story. Repeat each one out loud. Engineering feat, a remarkable achievement in building or construction. The Titanic was considered the greatest engineering feat of its time. Unsinkable and impossible to sink. Everyone believed the Titanic was completely unsinkable. Maiden voyage, the very first journey a ship ever makes. April 10th, 1912 was the Titanic's maiden voyage. Emigrant, a person who leaves their home country to live permanently in another. Hundreds of emigrants were on board hoping for a new life. Overcautious, more careful than the situation requires. In hindsight, they were not overcautious enough. Hindsight, when understanding a situation clearly only after it has happened. In hindsight, the warnings should have been taken seriously. Certain, like completely sure, with absolutely no doubt. Andrews was certain the ship would sink. Drill, a practice exercise or rehearsal for an emergency. No lifeboat drill had been conducted before departure. Composure, the ability to stay calm and in control under extreme pressure. The musicians showed extraordinary composure until the very end. Plunge, to fall or drop suddenly with great force into water or a deep place. The bow plunged into the ocean at 2:20 a.m. Hypothermia, a dangerous condition where the body loses heat faster than it can produce it. Many survivors suffered from severe hypothermia. Distress call, on an emergency signal sent by a ship or aircraft asking for immediate help. The Titanic sent one of the first SOS distress calls in history. Maritime, or relating to the sea, ships, and navigation. The disaster changed maritime law forever. The Titanic was found in 1985, 73 years after it sank. A team led by explorer Robert Ballard discovered the wreck 3,800 meters below the surface of the Atlantic. The bow was still recognizable. The stern was badly damaged, and across the ocean floor spread over a vast area were thousands of objects. Shoes, luggage, dishes, a child's toy, silent reminders of the lives that were lost. The Titanic has never been raised. It rests where it fell. And it will likely stay there forever, slowly being consumed by the ocean, piece by piece, year by year. But the story never fades, because the Titanic is not just a story about a ship, it is a story about human pride, about the dangerous belief that we have conquered nature, about what happens when confidence becomes arrogance, and arrogance meets an iceberg in the dark. In English, when someone has so much pride and confidence that they stop being careful, we call it hubris. Hubris is excessive pride that leads directly to disaster. The Titanic is history's greatest lesson in the dangers of hubris. If this episode helped you learn something new, hit the like button and leave a comment below. Tell me, which word from today was your favorite? Was it hindsight, composure, hubris, maritime? Write it in the comments. In English. That is your practice for today. And if you want the next episode, the story of how the Berlin Wall divided a city overnight, separated families forever, and created one of the most daring escape attempts in history, drop a comment that says Berlin Wall. Because that story has just as much vocabulary and just as much drama. Until next time. This is Vox Story. Keep learning, keep going,